Hello and welcome to the Calling the Real You podcast. I'm your host, Pamela Horton, and I call the real you out each and every week with special guests like the one we have today. Today we are talking with Calvin Wayman, and we're going to be discussing achieving breakthrough and permanently transforming into the new you. I'm really supremely inspired to be bringing Calvin to you today because you ever have those moments where you're trying to achieve, and let me just eliminate the word trying, when you are going after what you want and you feel like you're on the right path, but then all of a sudden you get hit, like you just run into a brick wall and you just feel so confused and you don't know what direction you're going in, and you're not understanding the process, but the process is what we have to trust. This is what Calvin Wayman is about to talk to us about today. And listen, you guys are all in for a very special treat. He is an author, a speaker, a sales expert, and a social media entrepreneur. In his early 20s, he, being awkward and shy, he held a company record for the worst performance a sales agent ever had in the company. And he, after almost being fired, he found a mentor and went on from having the worst performance to the very best. I'm so excited to bring you guys Calvin today. Calvin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Pamela, thank you so much for having me on. I'm honored and excited to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Listen, Calvin, you've got a really interesting story, and if you could just take a few minutes to share that story with us, where you've been and how you got to where you are today, it would be greatly appreciated because I want everyone to know about you.
Absolutely. The first thing that whenever I get that question is I want people to know that I'm a real dude. Like, there's nothing superhuman or crazy about me that way, and I think that's an important point to make because when we're on that journey that you were mentioning in the intro, and you hit into the walls and stuff like that, you look at these people that you admire, and you sometimes it can turn around on you and think that you're inadequate or that maybe you're not good enough. And I had that. I would be on this journey and I would look at other entrepreneurs or people I admired and thought, well, it'd be cool to get to them, but they're these untouchables, things I can't get to. And so, in any of this conversation that we have today, I just want to just set the foundation from the beginning that this is just a real person, a real human being, a real guy, a real dude that is going through and doing these things. So that's the first thing.
Awesome.
Now, the kind of my story is it really begins on the journey I'm on now. I quit my day job about 18 months ago. And I had no idea what I was going to do next. All I knew was what I had known for years, but didn't have the courage to actually act on it, or I had fear holding me down, and that was creating my own thing. And I had all the right reasons to stay at a day job. It was a management position, great pay. I had the practical reasons, like I have a wife and a 1-year-old son, and a very other practical reason that would make other people question my sanity, and that is I didn't have anything lined up for what I was going to do next when I quit all of that. And so, yeah, that's I ended up just quitting my day job and realizing that usually when you're put in a position or a situation that you have to figure it out, that's when you generally do. And even though that hasn't been a very comfortable journey at times, that's just what I've found to be true. And throughout the last 18 months, I've been privileged to not only connect with a lot of amazing entrepreneurs, but other people that have supported me to get featured in things like Entrepreneur Magazine, the Huffington Post, Social Media Examiner. Was just blessed to be named one of the top 30 entrepreneurs under 30 by influensive.com. And I just barely wrote my first book a few months ago, just launched Fish Out of Water, the guide to achieving breakthrough and permanently transforming into the new you. And every day it's just growing my social media business and doing what I can to look at myself in the mirror, look at fear in the mirror, and just keep stretching myself more and more because I find satisfaction in that growth and defying what I used to think as impossible or really, really, really difficult to do.
So first of all, congratulations on your success, what you've been able to do
Thank
in
you.
18 months, your new book. You really are an inspiration, Calvin. You are the epitome at this point of taking a leap of faith. And
Yes.
right, I mean, and it's not easy. It could be very scary, I imagine. You mentioned challenges
Yes.
and things of that nature. Tell us a little bit about what you mean by stretching yourself or the fear, for example.
Well, we always have these things that we think are impossible, especially when you first hear about it, like working your own business. I mean, that sounds like a really fun thing, but usually people dismiss that and think they could never do it. Another thing, I'll just tell you this that happened recently. About 4 weeks ago, I ran a ultra marathon, 50 miles in the mountains in rain and snow. And a year ago, that was impossible. There was no way that would happen. And so, even though that's not a business thing, and it wasn't even a physical thing, it was a mental thing. And those are the types of things that I want to continue to stretch in myself because I believe in the human potential, right? But there's so many times where we just dismiss that we could even do it. And it's just kind of cool for me now looking back that my 2015 resolution was to do something crazy and sign up for an 8 mile race. That was my big one. And when I first had the thought at the end of last year to run 50, I was like, oh, there's no way anybody has ever done that. There's no way. That's just crazy. And then I looked into it and found out I had a lot of friends that had done it. And then I had to take a step back and go, whoa, where else is that showing up in my life where I just dismissed it without even thinking about it or giving it a shot? And I just said, there's no way I'm capable of that. And so that's what I'm about. So I signed up for the challenge, but to see how it would affect other parts of my life, to do something and break through something that I once thought was impossible. And so that's kind of what fires me up and cranks my chain or whatever, or makes my boat float, is finding things that I once thought was difficult or impossible, and knowing that if I do it and I break through that other wall or that glass ceiling, that other cool things will come from it. And it's been with several things like the 50 mile, my book certainly, and starting my business.
Incredible. Yeah. Yeah, who does that, right? You've not you and because I remember having this conversation with you a few weeks back before. It was like a month before you were about to embark on that journey, and
Uh-huh.
I mean, who does that, right? Who does something without real, like, I know that you did some training, but people who do
Yeah.
ultra marathons train, years to have the
But
endurance and things of that
yeah,
nature. So again, congratulations on that. What was going through your mind? What was that like for you?
it depends on what point of it. Like if you mean through the race or before it, but before it, it was nerve-wracking because I hadn't even run a marathon before. And and I knew people ran a marathon, but I wanted to go through what it would feel like to go for something that's twice as hard and see if I could. I didn't know if I could. I honestly didn't. And the day before, when I was laying in bed at 8 o'clock at night, because I had to get up at 3 a.m. the next morning, I was worried. I had a headache from stress and was like, what's going to happen tomorrow? Because when I first signed up, one of the things too is I thought September would be the perfect weather. I had lived in California for a year and I loved the sunny, consistent weather, and so I was like, what could I do to match that? And I thought August would be too hot in Utah, and September would be, or I knew October would be getting really cold. And so I picked a race in September thinking it would be perfect. And then 2 weeks leading up to it, so even after you and I talked, this added element of, oh, it's going to be snowing throughout the race came up. And I was freaking out.
Mm.
I don't know if you want to go deep into like what it was like to actually go through the race, but before it, I'm just like any regular human being. I'm like, what's going to happen? And I didn't know, but
That's
I just decided to get up and go after it anyway.
I absolutely admire that. Whether or not I don't know if I would have the courage to do what you did, because it absolutely took courage and again that leap of faith. But yeah,
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about the journey through the race, would you?
yeah. So let's go halfway. So I get to a point where I am totally exhausted. My legs are totally gone, and I had about 60 people that passed me, and every single person was like, dude, are you okay? I mean, do you need any help? And I'm like, no, I'm good. I was just hobbling along, and this was at mile 25. I'm halfway done. So it so much is going through my mind. Am I going to finish? Because there was several things that happened throughout the race that were unpredictable factors. First thing is the race was in a big race like that, they have to have cutoffs, right? You have to hit a certain checkpoint by a certain time, or they pull you from the race. Now, when we got there, the first thing that happens is it's blizzarding so much at the top of the mountain where we were going to, and it was already snowing where we were at the lower part, that they had to delay the whole race 30 minutes. But all of the cutoffs had to stay the same. So what that meant was you now, for the first cutoff, you had 30 less minutes to get there in the rain and in the snow. And I was so freaking out about hitting that first cutoff, which was at mile 21, and it gave everything I could to make that first cutoff. And now, 4 miles later at mile 25, I'm done. Like, I was just spent, and I was like, what's going to happen? Can I do this? Because I don't know if I can make the next cutoff right now, which is at mile 28 or 29. But right when I was at this point, I just sat down. I luckily, I don't know if this was the woo-woo in me, but I brought an essential oil that I had on me to help my knees or whatever if it was gonna affect me. My knees were on fire, so I pulled out the essential oil, just rubbed my knees and everything. I basically said a little prayer and said, "Please give me fresh legs. I need it right now." And something interesting happened. From mile 26 to 39, I had never run faster in my entire life and never felt better. And this is was such a cool lesson for me later on because I was so dead at mile 25, and for 13 miles, the farthest I'd ever gone in my life, when I went past the point that was farther than any point I'd ever gone, 26 to 39, I ran faster and harder and felt better than when I first started the race. It was such a cool feeling. I was just flinging up the mountains. I felt like I was flying down the mountains. It was amazing. So that was a cool experience. But then something interesting happened near the end. I'm approaching one of the final checkpoints, and it was at mile 47, a little bit after 47. At this point in the race, everybody that was super fast were way ahead of me. Everybody that dropped out or was going to drop out had dropped out. So for the last let's say 3 or 4 hours, I was in the mountains just running by myself. I didn't see anyone. And I come up on this checkpoint. There's a few people there, and they asked me how I'm doing. I'm like, I'm doing great. And they said, unfortunately, we have to pull you. And I'm like, what? Pull me? And they're like, yeah, sorry. And I was like, what time is it? They said 6:50. The race ends at 8, I told them. I said, I got an hour and 10 minutes. I think I can do this. Let me keep going. And they said, well, the next checkpoint is actually in 15 minutes, and you're not going to make it. So we have to pull you. And kind of my motto, I guess, that I've developed that I didn't have 2 years ago, but doing the door-to-door thing after I quit my day job and then the challenges that I've done since, I was like, well, I didn't come here to make it official, like officially run 50. I came here to run 50. So I was like, can I just continue running down the mountain? Surely you don't own the mountain. And they were like, they were first looked confused, and then they were like, yeah, I mean, I guess so. We'll just have to take your badge so it's not official. And I was like, perfect, take my badge. And so right before they took my badge, or were about to, they called the head guy of the whole race and said, hey, number 163, Calvin Wayman wants to keep running. We're going to take his badge. We know that he just wants to run the 50, and he understands he's all alone. He has no more support, but he's going to keep going. And then the head guy comes back on and says, no, he's not. We can't do that. We're not going to do that. Put Calvin in the truck right now and drive down the mountain. And so I was like, crap. So I got put in the truck and was now driving down the mountain. And somebody checked their GPS, and I had gone 47.72 miles. I needed to go 2.28 miles left. That was it. And I said, if I have to run down the street to get 50, I'm going to do that, because there's no way I'm going to go through all of this and not hit it. And the cool thing is the supporting staff were all for it. They're like, dude, that's awesome. We're going to drop you off at the finish line. Feel free to just run one direction for a mile and point 14 and then turn around and come back. I was like, awesome, I'll do that. So that's what happened. They dropped me off at the finish line. Uh, I just went hobbling one direction, soaked to the bone at this point. I got out of a warm truck and hadn't been moving, and it was like 28 degrees. And oh man, I'd never chattered my teeth so loud as when I got out of that truck because I was so cold and I had to get moving. But I went moving one direction, 1.14 miles, flipped around, and just hobbled back. It was dark at this point. I had people coming up on bikes with lights and like, "Are you Calvin Wayman?" Like, "Yeah, that's me." And they're like, "Awesome, we know what you're doing. We'll go wait for you." And
Oh,
so by the time I got to the finish line, which was like 30 minutes later after they talked to me because I was going so slow at the end, they had like there was only like 3 or 4 people left. Everybody was gone, and there were people that just waited for me to cross that finish line to hit the 50. So I was literally the very last one. They took the balloons and everything deflated as soon as I crossed it. So that was my experience, and I I actually appreciate and like that it happened that way more than anything else because it's just so what I believe in. You always have hiccups, things that happen differently than you think you're going to. And there's this quote that Tony Robbins says that he tells a story with that has kind of stuck with me throughout this, and he says that life will pay any price you ask of it. And there's one word I like to add in that to emphasize what life is like. And if we all want greater things out of life, and it's not that life will just pay any price you ask, life will pay you any price you keep asking. And so that's what I'm all about is to whatever comes around, just keep asking.
mm.
So that's my experience.
That's incredible. So never mind prepping and leading and the mind chatter that must have been taking place in your head while you're running before mile 25, and as you approach it, you get into this warm van. You probably feel a little bit more comfortable even though you're soaked in
Yes.
sweat. And then you
Yes.
remove yourself from that comfort once more because of your
Yes.
determination and your perseverance. I mean, if that doesn't speak volumes as to the character and the person that you are, I don't know what does. And what a great role model you are for all of us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Calvin, how does your mindset and what you're thinking of and how you approach life, how can you convey that mindset to others when it comes to business and living their own lives? Because it's your
Okay.
experience running the 50 miles is really, I mean, it's different obviously because of logistics and the experience itself, but really it's no different than you leaving your safe, comfortable, warm
Yes.
job and
Yes.
and without anything planned
Yeah.
or building the parachute as you leap out of the plane. Tell me
Yep.
what's that mindset all about for you?
I've come to believe that every person knows the answer. And I want to put emphasis on the answer, meaning they know the next step. Everybody knows the next step. What gets people frozen is we want to know all the steps. So, for example, with me, people know where they want to go. Let's say they want to have freedom, so they want to create their own business. So they know that, but yet they're working a job, just like I was. What's the next step if you want to start your own business? Quit. Super simple, right? But it
Mm-hmm.
scares the hell out of you
Mm-hmm.
because you're like, I don't know if I can do that. I got to get all these things, and you don't know all the answers, right? So that's kind of what I've learned, and it's been a lot of stress and anxiety to come to this. But I think we all know the answer of the next thing, and if we just keep taking that next step, then good things happen. I explain it this way in my book. I ask in my book how many we want to know everything from A, B, C, D, all the way through Z. And I was like, how many letters are there really in life, though, or in entrepreneurship? And the answer is not 26 letters. There's actually only three. There's only three letters, and I'll explain. We know where we want to end up. We typically say, okay, that's the end goal. So we know our Z. We know our Z. We also know where we are, and we know the next step. We know B. But here's the thing. Everything between B and Z are unknown. And that's okay. They always will be. And the thing that keeps us stuck is we are trying to find out what C, D, E, and F is, and every other step along the way. And and I think that's even what creates anxiety is trying to figure those out. And so when I've surrendered to this understanding and realize that this is just how it is, that you cannot plan to win a chess game, for example. You can strategize, but there's these unknown variables that you want to adjust with. And it's not better to plan out everything because things that are going to happen that you'll want to change. It's all about what's the next step. Because here's the truth. I didn't really run 50 miles. That's the truth. That takes so much. When I was done at mile 25, I didn't know if I could run a 25 more. This is all I knew. I can take another step. As corny as that sounds, as cliche as it might be, I just did a little bit more and I chunked it and I was like, what's the next thing I can do? What do I know I can do? I didn't know I could run 50, but you know what I knew I could do? I knew I could take another step and then maybe half a mile and a full mile and then keep on doing those and taking the next step. What's right in front of me is what created the 50. So that's my mindset, and it's something that I haven't always had, and not having it has, again, created a lot of stress and anxiety at points. But having that understanding now is how I think and operate in everything I do. Okay, based on what I want, what's the next step? And go after that next step and trust it.
And trust it. That's another huge key, that leap of faith.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. There's this great video that people should watch if they haven't heard of it. It's by Steve Harvey, and it's called Jump. He has a little talk that he gives before his. He's talking to the studio audience, and it's such a perfect story for what life is like. And he says, every successful person in this world has jumped. And he gives this whole talk, and you're wondering what jumping is, right? And he says sometimes when you're in life, you're standing on the cliff of life, and you see people soaring by, and you're like, I want that. I want to be soaring. But he says the only way for you to soar is you've got to jump. Now, when you jump, he says, here's the problem. Your parachute will not open right away. Now, your parachute is your gift that opens up and provides your soar. But you cannot let that parachute will not even open until you jump. And you have to jump for it to open. But the kicker is it's not going to open right away. You might hit some rocks. You might get some skin torn off on them cliffs. But eventually, by jumping, that parachute will open up, and that is when you will have the soar and how your gift will carry you, whatever that is. But the only way for you to get to that point, you just said it. You have to trust that that parachute will open, and the only way to begin that is to look at that cliff of life, stand there, and just jump. Just jump.
That's awesome. That's a really cool story. I actually want to look that up. It was Steve Harvey's video.
Yeah, Steve Harvey Jump should find it for you if you search that on YouTube. It's such a cool video. He'll be able to explain it a lot better than I could.
You did
awesome.
A great job, Calvin.
Thank you.
How would you do it all over again? I know the answer to this.
50?
No, the leaving your job and doing what you're doing now.
110%.
Yeah. We all work, right? If you're part of corporate America, you and I have a similar background with that regard. If you're part of corporate America and you are absolutely miserable, or anywhere in the world, and you have a job and you are absolutely miserable, you're miserable because you're not living in alignment with who you are,
right,
and what your gifts are and what you're meant to share with us. Because each of us are a significant piece to the universal puzzle. And what you're professing and offering is a way, and you're offering the support by way of your book that you've written, which is awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And for those of you, it's like you work 40 hours and you're miserable, but when you take a leap of faith, what your passion is, what your purpose is, as you're defining it and finding it out, you may end up working even more hours to make all of this come to fruition. But from my experience and from what I'm hearing you, and please confirm, it's worth the experience.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is when you put that sweat and tears into it, makes it worth it. Going through the pain of the 50 miles, for example, is worth it. Having that satisfaction of not only did I do it, but knowing that whatever other challenge I have, I can always fall back on that and be like, dude, bro, you ran 50 miles in rain and snow. And there's a confidence that comes from that I now have going through that pain. It makes all the pain so much more meaningful, I feel like, when you're doing it, what you said, being in alignment of what you're meant to do. Now, something that I want to just kind of to give justice to the whole picture when you asked me if I would do it all over again. When I was getting started, man, I don't know if I would have. When I was doing it, the only thing I could think of is I am so glad I did not know it was going to feel this painful, because I don't know how long it would have delayed it. So I want to be just totally open and upfront to anyone listening to this is I'm not going to be one of those people that just say it's going to be perfect. And I think it's important to know that it's not going to be perfect, because when you hit that wall, I don't want you to think that something's wrong with you or that you're not good enough. Know that anyone that goes through it is going to feel that. And so when I was getting started, when I was in it, and I'm still in it in different aspects of my life, going after different goals and dreams, but I think it's important to know that when I was getting started, I felt like I would not have wished for the sleepless nights, the week of anxiety, waking up in sweat and losing 10 pounds in a week, wondering what I'm going to do next, being so worried for my family, like all those things. I wouldn't have wished those on my worst enemy. So that's just the other side of it. At this point, having greater perspective, right? Now that I have more perspective and of the process, I can say with confidence that yes, I would do it again, 110%. That doesn't mean it's going to be rosy.
Right.
So,
it's definitely not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. It really isn't. It's not for everyone, but it is meant to be encouraging in terms of when you do take that next step and understand that that's all you need to know, and then have the faith and the trust. But I commend you. I absolutely commend you. Share your sentiments about it, and thank you for your transparency and your honesty. It's important, and I think it's been lacking a few years in this space, and so thanks for bringing it to the forefront.
My pleasure, Pamela.
Yeah. Calvin, would you be my guest sometime in the future again? Because there's a lot of areas that I really wanted to dive even deeper, and our time is already up, if you can believe
Wow, that went by in a flash.
Yeah, it did. You're awesome, and I want people to learn even more about your wisdom. Those pain points that we experience in the entrepreneurial space as you're growing yourself and your business, they're necessary, because you're gaining a PhD really in life and in who you are, so that you can better give of yourself, which is what it's about, being of service. So I'd love to have you back as my guest in the future.
It would be an honor, Pamela. And like I told you in the back beforehand, especially with your name being what it is, it's one of my favorite names. It's my older sister's name, so Pamela's a great name. And so if I have a Pamela ask me back, then heck yes, I'm going to do it.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who don't know, the meaning of Pamela, at least in the Greek origin, is all honey. So your sister must be super sweet.
Dude, she's the sweetest person in the world, and so that makes so much sense now.
Awesome. Calvin, it's been an absolute pleasure sharing you with the audience here. I want to thank you for your time and your energy. I want to thank those of you who have joined us today, and in the future when you click on the link to listen to Calvin's episode. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us and joining us on the Calling the Real You podcast. Feel free to connect with us. For me personally, on Facebook, Pamela, that's with 2 L's actually, Horton, and also Calling the Real You. Calvin, how is it that people can find you and your book?
Best way is to go to calvinwayman.com/book. There's a link up there for everyone, so go to calvinwayman.com/book.
Awesome. Thank you. And a few more folks that I need to thank for their support and love, and they include my husband, Eric Horton. He's my best friend and my business partner. Reverend Patricia Brooks, also Sacred Stories, and Lux Salon and Spa, Yola Portraits, Jim Oliver, the Emmy Award-winning musician, and Karen DeFelice from Karen DeFelice Designs. Thank you, everybody. Until next week, have a wonderful time. And remember, call the real you out.